It's 3 a.m., and I'm sitting here typing because there's no way I'm sleeping. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever look at my driveway the same way again. 3 weeks ago, I was just another 28-year-old working customer service for a cable company in suburban Phoenix. I lived alone in my dad's old rental after he passed last year. The place isn't much. 2 bedrooms, peeling paint on the shutters, and a yard that's basically just dirt. But it's mine now, and the mortgage keeps me distracted from how unnervingly quiet it gets at night. My life had settled into this rhythm: work, Netflix, the occasional beer with my neighbor Jeff. Predictable, boring. Now, boring sounds like heaven. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when Trevor knocked on my door. I hadn't seen him since we graduated from Westview High 10 years ago. But there he was, same crooked grin, same shaggy brown hair, only thinner, gaunt even. His leather jacket looked like it had survived a decade in the back of a truck, and his jeans had holes that weren't the fashionable kind. "Hey man, long time no see," he said, like we'd spoken yesterday instead of a decade ago. His eyes didn't match his tone. They were restless, flicking around like he expected something to leap out from the shadows. He shifted from foot to foot, and when he smiled, it never quite reached his eyes. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Mind if I come in? I could really use a friend right now." There was something urgent under his words, but I didn't think much of it then. We ended up on my couch with a couple beers while he told me he'd been in Las Vegas doing construction, but things went bad with his girlfriend. He just needed a place to crash for a few days. Every few minutes he'd check his phone or glance at the window whenever a car rolled by, his jaw tightening. "You know how it is," he said, downing a long swallow of beer. "Sometimes you just need to disappear for a while. Let things cool down." When I asked what kind of things, his answer turned vague. Just drama, and people who don't know when to let things go. He was telling me something but leaving the important parts out. Still, we'd been friends once. Same lunch table. Same bad jokes in math class. Maybe I felt like I owed him. By the time we finished our 3rd beer, he'd already tossed his worn duffel into the corner and was asking about extra blankets. I told him the couch was his, ignoring the voice in my head saying this felt wrong. He looked relieved in a way that went beyond having a roof over his head, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "Thanks, buddy," he said, and for a moment, the smile seemed real. "I owe you one. This is just temporary. I promise." That night, I went to bed feeling like I'd done the right thing. If I'd known what was coming, I would have driven him to a motel and paid for the room myself. The first few days seemed normal enough. Trevor disappeared during the day, claiming to be job hunting, and came back around dinner with groceries or takeout, always paid in cash. He parked his beat-up Ford Taurus at the end of the block, saying he didn't want to block my driveway, but he always left it where he could watch both ends of the street from my living room window. At night, he'd sit scrolling on his phone with the brightness turned way down, occasionally peeking through the blinds if a car slowed near the house. When I asked about it, he just shrugged. "City living makes you paranoid. You get used to checking for break-ins." Friday morning, I came into the kitchen to find him fully dressed, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His hair was a mess, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look a decade older. "Hey, I need a huge favor," he said before I'd even poured coffee. "My car's making this weird noise, and I've got an appointment across town I absolutely can't miss. Can I borrow yours for a few hours?" He nodded toward my 2018 Toyota Camry in the driveway, my one reliable possession. The way he asked didn't feel like a request. His voice had a sharp edge to it, like refusal wasn't on the table. "It's really important, man. I'll have it back by noon, I swear." I wanted to say no, but after letting him stay almost a week, it felt petty to refuse. I tossed him the keys and told him to be careful. From the window, I watched him adjust the mirrors and seat like he was prepping for a road trip, not a short drive. Noon came and went. Then 2 o'clock. By 4 p.m., I was calling Trevor's phone. Straight to voicemail, no rings, just that immediate click to the generic message. I tried again, And again. Same thing. By evening, I was pacing my living room, swinging between irritation and a gnawing worry I couldn't shake. Maybe the appointment ran long. Maybe the Camry broke down. A dozen reasonable explanations flickered through my head, but none of them calmed that heavy knot in my gut. I kept replaying the past week, how he'd watched the street, paid in cash, dodged my questions about Vegas. Around 10 p.m., I called my insurance company, feeling like an idiot, to say my car might be stolen. The rep asked if I wanted to file a police report. I hesitated. Trevor was supposed to be my friend, but by midnight, with no word and my car still gone, I had to face the possibility I'd been conned from the start. I barely slept, checking my phone every few minutes, glancing out the window like I might see headlights swing into the driveway. Saturday crawled by with no updates. I called local hospitals, even checked jail rosters online, telling myself it was thoroughness, not paranoia. That evening, I was halfway through a beer, debating whether to call the police again, when I heard the familiar rumble of my Camry in the driveway. Relief hit me so hard I felt lightheaded. Trevor was back, probably with some ridiculous story about his phone dying. I went to the door, ready to unload on him. But through the peephole, my relief twisted into confusion. Trevor stepped out of the driver's seat, but he wasn't alone. A tall blonde woman in dark sunglasses, despite the setting sun, got out on the passenger side. Both of them scanned the street like they were expecting someone to follow. I opened the door before they could knock. Trevor's expression snapped into a too relaxed smile that didn't convince anyone. "Hey, buddy. Sorry I'm late," he said like it had been an hour, not over a day. "This is Amanda, my friend from Vegas. She drove down to help me with some stuff." Amanda gave me a curt nod and kept scanning the neighborhood. Her angular face was tight. Her posture wound like a spring. Trevor launched into a rushed explanation about car trouble and waiting on parts, but I wasn't listening. I was noticing Amanda's hand buried in an oversized purse. The fact that neither of them looked like they'd showered in days, and the heap of plastic bags and camping gear in my back seat. "We just need to grab my stuff and we'll be out of your hair," Trevor said, already moving past me into the house. I wasn't feeling cool about anything. As they walked inside, I caught a sharp, metallic scent, burnt rubber mixed with something I couldn't place. Amanda vanished into the bathroom and locked the door. Trevor started stuffing clothes into his duffel with shaking hands, avoiding eye contact. When I asked where they'd been, he muttered something about business in Tucson. That's when I noticed the fresh scratches on his knuckles and a small cut on his cheek that hadn't been there when he left. My car keys were still in his pocket. When I held out my hand, he hesitated just a beat too long before dropping them into my palm. They were warm, sticky. I didn't want to know why. Every instinct screamed to get them out of my house. Sunday morning, I woke to the sound of car doors slamming. Through my window, I watched them speed off in his battered Ford Taurus, leaving behind only tire marks and the smell of cigarettes and unease. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I wandered the house, spotting things that didn't sit right. The bathroom window was cracked open. Muddy footprints led through my kitchen, too big to be mine. My Camry's gas tank was nearly empty, even though Trevor swore he'd only driven across town. Then I found the crumpled receipt in the driveway, from a gas station in Flagstaff, 3 hours north of Phoenix, nowhere near Tucson. A closer look at my car revealed a dent in the rear bumper and blue paint transfer, the exact shade of a police cruiser. My hands shook as the pieces slid into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Monday at 7:30 a.m., 3 police cars rolled up, lights flashing but no sirens. I was sipping coffee when Detective Lisa Morrison knocked on my door, badge in hand. She asked if I knew Trevor Jameson and when I'd last seen him. Then she told me Trevor was wanted for an armed robbery in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and that my car had been caught on camera at 2 separate crime scenes over the weekend, one in Flagstaff, one in Sedona. "We believe you may have unknowingly assisted a fugitive," she said. Everything clicked into place. I told her everything, how he'd shown up out of nowhere, the strange behavior, the borrowed car, Amanda. They impounded my Camry for evidence and said I'd need to give a formal statement at the station. As I watched my car being loaded onto the tow truck, I realized my quiet, boring life was now part of a criminal investigation, and for the first time I was grateful to be counted as a victim instead of an accomplice. Last spring, when I was 17 and living with my Aunt Catherine in Cedar Falls, something happened that still keeps me awake at night. It was late March, just before Easter break, and the air had finally started to warm after what felt like the longest winter I'd ever endured. At the time, I was a junior at Westfield High, spending nearly all my free time with my three closest friends, Chloe, Vanessa, and Brooklyn. We'd been inseparable since middle school, bonded by being the weird kids who'd rather swap ghost stories and marathon horror films than gossip about classmates. My parents had moved to Denver the year before for work, leaving me in Catherine's care. She was the kind of aunt everyone wished they had, laid back, understanding, and always ready to stock the pantry with snacks. Her night shifts at the local hospital meant the house was usually ours on weekends. It became the unofficial headquarters for sleepovers and movie marathons that bled into sunrise. The whole thing started when Brooklyn inherited an old Victorian house from her great-aunt Millicent, who died that February. The place sat on the edge of town, hidden behind overgrown hedges and guarded by towering oaks like something ripped from a Gothic novel. Brooklyn's parents were planning to sell it, but told her to look through the belongings first. None of us had ever been inside, though we'd driven past countless times daring each other to set foot on the property. The neighbors whispered about strange noises from the basement, and rumors hinted that Millicent had been involved in unusual things. When Brooklyn suggested we explore the house on Friday night, it felt like the perfect kind of trouble. We were restless, eager for something to jolt us out of the ordinary, a night we could brag about later. That Friday, we packed our usual sleepover gear, sleeping bags, junk food, and Chloe's ever-present camera equipment for her YouTube channel. The plan was simple: meet at my place around 7, grab dinner, then hit the house after dark. Brooklyn had the keys, plus a stern warning from her parents to be careful and not stay too late. But at 17, we thought we were untouchable. Warnings only made it more exciting. We pulled up around 9 p.m., and the smell hit us before the car doors even opened. A heavy, musty odor like damp soil laced with something sweet and rotten. It clung to the air, curling in the back of your throat. Vanessa grimaced, muttering about how disgusting it was, but Brooklyn brushed it off as mildew and stale air. Up close, the house loomed like it had been waiting for us. 3 stories of dark wood, peeling paint, and boarded windows on the second floor. The wraparound porch sagged, and the front door, a massive oak slab etched with intricate, almost Celtic designs, looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. When Brooklyn turned the key, the door groaned open, long and low, as if the house was waking up. Inside, it was exactly what you'd picture: dust-coated furniture hidden under white sheets, family portraits whose painted eyes followed you no matter where you stood, and that same suffocating smell of neglect and decay. We roamed the main floor for nearly an hour, cracking jokes to mask the tension, filming everything. The kitchen still had dishes in the sink, like Millicent had left mid-meal, and the living room was cluttered with strange objects: crystals, bunches of dried herbs, and books in languages none of us could name. It was Chloe who noticed the basement door, wedged beneath the main staircase. Heavy wood, 3 separate locks. Brooklyn had a whole ring of keys, but it took 20 minutes of fumbling to get them open. As we worked, the smell intensified, coiling tighter around us. Vanessa suggested maybe calling it a night, but curiosity won. The door creaked wide, revealing a staircase that vanished into pure darkness. The basement was far larger than we'd expected, multiple rooms branching from a central space with low, arched ceilings that made you hunch without thinking. Our phone flashlights barely pierced the gloom, shadows sliding across the walls whenever we moved. The main room was crammed with more of Millicent's collection: jars of preserved things, more books, and what looked like altars or shrines in each corner. But it was the small room at the very back that stopped us. The door was painted entirely black, its surface carved with deep alien symbols. Opening it took more effort than it should have, and when we did, a wave of warmth rolled over us. The walls were etched floor to ceiling with swirling, intricate carvings, symbols and figures that seemed to crawl when you weren't looking directly at them. In the center sat a circular stone platform, about 4 feet across, its surface grooved with channels that led to small holes along the edges. The stone was stained dark, as if something had seeped into it long ago. Candle stubs ringed its base, their wax pooled in strange, unnatural shapes. Chloe kept filming, leaning in for close-ups, asking Brooklyn if her great-aunt had ever mentioned anything about this place. Brooklyn only shook her head, eyes wide, voice thin. Never. I didn't even know this was here. The air felt charged, heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. And all of us began noticing how our phones were acting wrong. Screens freezing mid-recording, flashlights stuttering in and out, battery levels jumping from 80% to 15% and back again in seconds. Vanessa's voice trembled when she finally said, "We should go back upstairs. Maybe come back during the day when we can actually see." But Chloe wasn't hearing it. She was in full-on documentary mode now, eyes lit up like she'd just stumbled on her big break. "Do you realize what this could do for my channel?" she said, fiddling with her camera settings. "We stay a little longer, get more footage, and this could go viral." Brooklyn stood with her hands pressed against the wall carvings, fingertips tracing the grooves. "I swear, my parents never told me anything about this," she murmured almost to herself. Not one word. The heat in the room kept climbing until we were peeling off jackets and sweaters, but it didn't feel like normal warmth. It felt like it came from inside our bones, curling outward. Then, around midnight, we heard it. Our first sound from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing across the main floor directly above us. We froze, holding our breath. The sound stopped abruptly, like someone had realized we were listening. "Old house?" Chloe said too quickly. "It's settling." But no old floorboard creaked that evenly, that purposefully. That's when the arguing began. Vanessa's voice cracked as she insisted we leave immediately, while Chloe shot back, "No way, we need to check it out." We landed on the worst compromise we could have made. Chloe declared she was staying the night, no matter what, sleeping bag already ready. Vanessa and Brooklyn reluctantly agreed to stay too, but only in the main basement area, not in the carved room. I should have told them all we were leaving together. Should have trusted that twisting knot in my stomach since the moment we opened the black door. But instead I stayed, half out of loyalty, half because I needed to know. We carried our gear downstairs, arranging sleeping bags in a loose circle at the base of the stairs, far enough from the carved room that the unnatural heat didn't reach us. Chloe positioned her camera on a tripod, aimed straight at the black door, and we settled in to wait. Around 1 a.m., the footsteps returned. More frequent now, sometimes dragging, sometimes accompanied by the sound of something heavy sliding across the floor above. Still, we stayed put. Pride's a stubborn thing at 17. And then it happened. Something I still can't explain. Around 2 a.m., a crushing drowsiness hit all of us at once, like someone had pulled the plug on our energy. 1 second we were whispering nervously, the next my eyelids felt like lead. Vanessa went first, curled in her bag and breathing slow and deep within minutes. Brooklyn followed soon after. I fought to keep my eyes open, glancing over at Chloe, still upright, muttering under her breath about how weird it was that we were all so tired. The last thing I saw was her leaning toward the camera, adjusting the lens. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight was streaming through the grimy basement windows. My back ached like I'd slept on bare stone. My mouth was dry, my head pounding, and there was a faint metallic tang on my tongue, like blood. Vanessa and Brooklyn were still asleep, but Chloe's spot was empty. Her sleeping bag lay crumpled. The camera still sat on the tripod, aimed at the black door, but her jacket, shoes, and phone were untouched in her bag. We searched every inch of the basement for 20 minutes, calling her name until our voices went hoarse. The carved room looked exactly the same. except the air inside was cool now, and some candle stubs around the stone platform had fresh drips of wax. We tried the stairs. The heavy door above was still locked from the inside, just as we'd left it. Brooklyn pulled the key from her pocket with shaking hands. That's when the panic really set in. We called Chloe's parents, then the police, stumbling over our words trying to explain how someone could just vanish from a locked basement. At first, the cops' eyes told us they didn't believe a word, but after they searched the house themselves and found no other exits, their tone shifted. They brought in search dogs, forensics, the whole thing. 3 days later, nothing. No tracks, no scent trail, no sign she'd ever left. The investigation dragged on for weeks before going cold. Her parents plastered missing posters across town, hired private investigators, even brought in a psychic who muttered about negative energy clinging to the house. Brooklyn's parents put the property on the market immediately, but no one would touch it. It still sits empty. Sometimes I drive past, trying not to imagine her still down there. The three of us who made it out, Vanessa, Brooklyn, and me, we don't talk about it anymore. We tried at first, piecing together what we remembered, but it only made things worse. We're graduating next month and we'll probably go our separate ways. But there's one detail I've never told anyone until now. Later, when we watched Chloe's camera footage, the last thing it caught was her getting up around 3 a.m., moving slowly toward the carved room, her steps heavy, dreamlike. Just before she vanished into the dark beyond the frame, she turned back and stared into the lens. Her face was blank, eyes empty, but her lips were moving. We played it over and over, but could never make out the words. The camera shut off right after that, and Chloe was never seen again. People like to say you can always tell when something's wrong, but that's not true. Sometimes it seeps in slowly in bits and pieces, and by the time you realize you're in the middle of it, you're already too deep to back out. Back then, I was living alone in a small duplex on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky. I worked night shifts at a printing warehouse, came home smelling like ink and machine oil, and mostly kept to myself. My family and I weren't close, except for my older brother, Caleb. He was 2 years older, a little reckless, but the kind of reckless that made life interesting. Caleb could fill a room with both chaos and comfort, sometimes in the same breath. He was one of those people who could talk himself out of anything, and that night he tried to. It was 2:20 in the morning when my phone lit up. I remember the exact time because I just microwaved leftover wings and curled up on the couch, the blanket still half folded from the night before. Caleb's name appeared on the screen, and I answered without thinking, expecting something dumb or drunk, or both. The first thing I heard was breathing. Shaky, uneven, not like him at all. Then he said, "I need you to tell the cops I was with you all night." No hello, no joke, just that. I chuckled, waiting for him to laugh, but the silence on the other end was heavy. His voice came again, low and urgent. "Please trust me. Say I was at your place tonight. I need you to say that." I didn't ask why. I just said yes. 5 minutes later, I was still staring at my phone when red and blue lights flickered through the closed blinds. A patrol car was parked outside Caleb's apartment, 3 blocks down from mine. That's when it began to feel wrong. Not scary, not yet. Just sharp, like I'd suddenly become aware of everything. The soft creak of my fridge settling, the buzz of the streetlight outside, the fact that I hadn't actually seen Caleb in over a week. I walked to the window. 2 officers stepped out of the car. One knocked on Caleb's door while the other lingered near the trunk of his car, which sat crooked at the curb, engine still running. A few minutes later, the engine cut off. I never saw Caleb come to the door. The cops stayed maybe 10 minutes, then left. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a bar fight, maybe a DUI scare. I didn't sleep much that night. The next afternoon, a knock rattled my door. 2 plainclothes detectives stood there, calm but firm. They asked if I'd seen Caleb the night before. I repeated the story he'd asked me to tell. Yeah, he was here all evening. They exchanged a look, subtle but quick. One asked, "What time did he leave?" I hesitated. Too long. Then I mumbled something about midnight. They nodded, thanked me, and left. When the door closed, my chest felt tight. I tried calling Caleb. No answer. I texted. They came to my place. What's going on? Nothing. By 6 that evening, the silence felt unbearable. I walked to his apartment. His car was still there, parked exactly the same, but the trunk was now closed and locked. I knocked. No answer. I let myself in with the spare key he'd given me a year ago after locking himself out. The apartment was still unnervingly clean. No dishes in the sink, no jacket by the door. But his phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, plugged in, screen lighting up with missed calls, including mine. I stood there staring at it, unsure which was worse, that he hadn't taken it or that he clearly hadn't wanted to answer. Down the hallway, the bathroom door was half open. His bedroom looked untouched. Bed made, closet doors shut. But on the dresser, there was a photo of us from when we were kids taken at our grandma's old trailer. It had been turned face down. That's when the unease shifted into something heavier. Not full panic, just the slow, cold realization that I'd lied without asking a single question. The next morning, everything unraveled. A woman named Danielle Conrad had been reported missing. 27 years old, lived on Caleb Street, just 4 houses down. The news anchor said her name like everyone should already know it. I didn't. But the face on the screen was familiar. The kind of familiar that itches at the back of your brain until you place it. After a few minutes, I remembered. She worked part-time at the gas station near the warehouse where I did my night shifts. Always had chunky metal rings on every other finger. The kind that caught the fluorescent light when she counted change. She chewed bright pink gum that smelled like strawberries, if strawberries were made in a factory. I'd seen her laugh with customers, but never with the other employees. Quiet but not shy, like she was holding back her real voice. The news said she hadn't shown up for work that morning. She wasn't answering her phone. Her car was still parked in the driveway. No sign of forced entry. What made my chest tighten was the timeline. The last confirmed sighting was around 10:15 p.m. The same night Caleb called me. Witnesses saw her pulling into her driveway after work, carrying grocery bags. No screams, no noise, just gone. The police were canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing residents. I read the article twice. Then again. By the third time, I could hear Caleb's voice in my head, how hoarse it had been, how deliberate. Tell them I was with you all night. Not, I need help. Not, I screwed up. Just a demand. That evening, I sat in my car across from Caleb's apartment, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. It had been over 36 hours since I'd heard from him. His car was still there, but something about it made my stomach twist. The back bumper had streaks of dried mud, like he'd driven through a ditch or field. Caleb hated getting his car dirty. He'd complain if a single leaf stuck to the windshield. My eyes kept drifting to the trunk. Locked, sure, but I couldn't stop picturing him standing there that night, closing it fast, face pale under the streetlight. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Caleb. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept. "Don't ask me anything," he said. "You're not involved. I'm going away for a while, just forget about it." I asked where he was. He hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. 3 days later, police found Danielle's body in a drainage tunnel behind an abandoned storage lot 2 towns over. No details released, just suspicious death and a statement that they were looking into persons of interest. Caleb's apartment had been searched, his car impounded. I didn't tell them about the call. I told them I hadn't heard from him since that night. The guilt didn't arrive like a punch. It came in slow, jagged waves, usually late at night when the house creaked or a distant siren threaded through the dark. I kept thinking about the trunk, about how quickly I'd said yes without knowing what I was agreeing to. What unsettles me most isn't even what he might have done. It's how easy the lie slid out of my mouth when the detectives knocked. Like I'd been rehearsing it my whole life. I started avoiding that part of the neighborhood, changed my work schedule so I wouldn't drive past his street. Every couple of months I'd search online for updates. His name never came up. Danielle's name faded from headlines. It's like they both just dissolved. Sometimes I tell myself it could have all been some awful coincidence, that Caleb hadn't done anything. But then I remember his voice. Not the words, the voice. It sounded like someone who knew a door had closed behind him for good. I've never told anyone what really happened that night. Not my coworkers, not my parents, not even the girl I've been seeing for the past year. But I think about it all the time. I said, yes. That's the part I can't ever shake. The music from Murphy's bar was still thumping in my skull when I stumbled outside at 1:47 a.m., the November air slicing through my thin jacket like it had a personal grudge. My breath puffed white in the cold, and my bare legs felt instantly numb under the flimsy mini dress I thought was a good idea hours earlier. I'm a junior at State University, studying psychology, and that night was all about celebrating my roommate Jessica's 21st birthday. Too many cosmos, not nearly enough food, and way too much pretending I liked tequila shots. Jessica had vanished an hour ago with some guy from her statistics class, leaving me swaying slightly against the brick wall, my heels scraping the sidewalk as I tried to steady myself. My phone glowed in my hand, 12% battery. A little warning in the corner of the screen, but I brushed it off. All I wanted was to crawl into my dorm bed and forget about the pounding in my head. The street was mostly empty, except for a group of other students staggering toward the pizza place next door. I opened the rideshare app, watching the little animated cars circle the map while shivering in place. Estimated wait, 12 minutes. 12 minutes feels like forever at almost 2 in the morning when you're alone and freezing. I thought of something my psych professor had drilled into us: situational awareness, decision fatigue, those clinical academic terms suddenly pressing against my reality. My driver was listed as Michael, black Honda Accord, plate ending in 847, 4.9 stars. I scrolled through reviews. On time, friendly, safe driver. Then a black sedan rolled up right in front of me, headlights bright against the empty street. Without hesitation, without even looking at the plate, I pulled the door open and slid inside. The warm leather hugged me, the air filled with vanilla air freshener, and something faint but strange, metallic maybe, underneath. "Hey, thanks for coming so quick," I said, fastening my seatbelt. The driver, a middle-aged man with graying temples and a crisp navy polo, glanced at me in the mirror. Kind eyes, professional nod. "No problem at all, miss. University dorms, right?" "Yeah," I confirmed, pulling my phone back up to check the route. Battery at 8%. He drove smoothly, and we made small talk. Weekend crowds my major. He said his daughter was considering psychology too. His voice was steady, warm even, and for a moment, the hum of the engine and the heat lured me toward sleep. Until I noticed the streets had changed. We weren't heading toward campus. The buildings grew sparse, streetlights farther apart, shadows deeper. I sat up, phone in hand, but the screen went black. Dead. "Excuse me," I said, forcing casualness into my voice. "I think we're going the wrong way. The university's back toward downtown." His eyes in the mirror had changed. The warmth was gone. "We're taking a little detour," he said flatly. A chill spread through me that had nothing to do with the November air. I told myself maybe there was construction or a blocked road. I tried again, voice pitched higher than I wanted. "I really need to get back. I've got an early class tomorrow." No answer, just the quiet click of the automatic locks. The sound rang out like a gunshot in the enclosed space. The vanilla smell became suffocating. My fingers gripped the handle, pulling hard. Nothing. The scenery outside was now warehouses, chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Empty, dead streets. My breathing grew shallow, loud in my ears. I tried to recall every lecture on crisis response, on staying calm, but panic was a living thing in my chest, clawing upward. "If this is about money, I can pay you extra," I said. "I just want to go home." He glanced at me again, and this time, what I saw wasn't greed or anger. It was something hungrier: anticipation. We slowed at a deserted intersection, not a soul in sight, no traffic, no lights in the windows of the hulking warehouses. "You know what your problem is?" His voice was conversational now, almost friendly, and it was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "You kids are too trusting. You just hop into any car without checking." My heart hammered so violently I thought it might give me away. And that's when the realization struck like ice water. I never checked the license plate. In my rush to escape the cold, I hadn't even thought. The first black car that pulled up, I just assumed it was mine. My stomach knotted as the realization hit, a heavy, sinking weight. How could I have been so stupid? I scanned the spotless interior for anything I could use as a weapon, or at least a way to signal for help. Nothing. Just the faint, metallic scent I still couldn't place, and a tiny green pine tree air freshener swaying from the rearview mirror. The tinted windows were so dark I doubted anyone could see me, even if there had been someone outside, which there wasn't. My palms were slick with sweat as I yanked the door handle again, harder this time. The lock didn't even rattle. Another turn, and the scenery shifted into something worse. Rows of abandoned buildings, their windows boarded or shattered, lots choked with weeds. Streetlights were rare here, and the ones that worked cast warped shadows across the road, reaching long and thin into the car. "Where are we going?" I asked, no longer bothering to mask my fear. My voice trembled, and I didn't care. "Please, just let me out. I won't tell anyone. I'll say you dropped me off where you were supposed to." He laughed. It wasn't the warm, friendly chuckle from earlier. This was different. Low, deliberate, and wrong. The kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl because it tells you they know something you don't. "Oh, but we're almost there," he said, catching my eyes in the mirror. "Just a little further now." The dashboard clock glared back at me. 2:23 a.m. Even if someone realized I was missing, no one would be looking for hours. Then I remembered the emergency whistle. My mom had given it to me when I left for college, calling it her paranoid mom insurance policy. My keys were buried deep in my purse, but I started digging slowly, pretending to search for lip balm, trying not to raise suspicion. The car was slowing now. Up ahead, a hulking warehouse loomed out of the dark, a single flickering bulb buzzing above a loading dock. Every instinct screamed at me, "Do something, now." My fingers closed around the whistle and I kept it hidden in my palm. "You seem nervous," he said, still watching me in the mirror. "Don't be. This will all be over soon." The words cut through me like ice. The tires crunched over gravel as he turned into the warehouse lot. The moment he shifted into park, I moved. I jammed the whistle into my lips and blew with every ounce of air in my lungs. The shrill sound shattered the night, bouncing off the metal walls of the warehouse. At the same time, I started kicking at the window hard, heels slamming against the glass, pain shooting up my leg. But I didn't stop. "Help! Somebody help me!" I screamed between blasts of the whistle. His reaction was instant, rage twisting his face as he spun toward me, lunging into the back seat. But in his fury, his arm hit the lock switch. The doors popped open with a sharp click. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself out, nearly tripping on the gravel, and ran. My heels clattered against the asphalt, the sound ragged and frantic. Behind me, his voice rose, shouting something I couldn't make out over my own desperate breathing. I kept the whistle going, sharp and relentless, praying it would draw anyone's attention. His footsteps were behind me, but fading. Either he was slowing down or I was running faster than I'd ever thought possible. Then, like a lifeline, headlights appeared on the main road ahead, 2 blocks away. I bolted toward them, waving my arms, screaming. The vehicle slowed. A delivery truck. The driver's eyes widened when he saw me, and he pulled over fast, rolling down his window. "Miss, are you okay? What happened?" I was sobbing, words stumbling out. "Someone tried to kidnap me. Please call 911. He reached for his radio without hesitation, relaying my description to dispatch. I clung to the side of his truck, my knees threatening to give out. When I looked back, the black car was gone, just darkness and silence. The police arrived in under 10 minutes, an ambulance right behind them, even though I kept insisting I wasn't injured. They took my statement, combed the warehouse lot, but found only tire tracks in the gravel. The officer told me I'd done the right things, making noise, resisting, and escaping as fast as possible. They never caught him. Later, I found out the real rideshare driver, Michael, had arrived at Murphy's 20 minutes after I'd left. He'd been waiting in a black Honda Accord, license plate ending in 847, the right car. The app's records made it clear. While he was parked outside, I'd been climbing into a predator's car. Apparently, it's a tactic that's becoming disturbingly common. People lurking outside bars and parties, waiting for drunk, distracted college students to mistake their vehicle for a rideshare. Now I still use rideshare apps, but I check everything before getting in. License plate, driver's face, name. I keep my phone fully charged, and that whistle still dangles from my keychain. And every so often I think about that night, and how close I came to being just another unsolved case. Because my mom was paranoid enough to give me a way to fight back. The whole thing began on a Tuesday evening in late July 2019. I'm a single mom to my 16-year-old son, Tyler, and we live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Milwaukee. At the time, I was working long shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, constantly juggling exhaustion and responsibility ever since my divorce 2 years earlier. Tyler was a good kid. Honor roll, played basketball, never gave me more than the usual teenage headaches. He had this friend, Ethan, who'd been around for about 6 months. Always polite. Yes ma'am, no ma'am. But there was something about him I couldn't quite place. He was tall for 17, with sandy brown hair that always looked like he'd just run his fingers through it. His clothes were clean but worn, as though they'd been washed too many times. And he had this habit of watching people when he thought no one noticed. Quick glances that lingered just a second too long. That day had been brutal. 2 patients gone in the span of 1 shift. I came home feeling wrung out, ready to microwave some leftover pasta, pour a glass of wine, and sink into the couch. The house was unusually quiet. Tyler usually had music blasting or his PlayStation going, so the silence felt strange. "Ty?" I called, dropping my purse on the kitchen counter. He appeared from the living room with Ethan trailing behind. Both of them carried this heavy, subdued energy, like they'd been talking about something serious. Tyler's cheeks were flushed. Ethan shifted from foot to foot, eyes darting between me and the floor. "Mom." Tyler's tone was careful, the kind kids use when they're about to ask for something big. Ethan had a really bad fight with his parents tonight. His dad threw some of his stuff out on the lawn. The sight of Ethan hunched in on himself tugged at me. He wasn't crying, but there was a defeated slump to his shoulders that reminded me of a dog that's been kicked too many times. His t-shirt had a small tear at the collar, and I noticed a faint bruise on his forearm that hadn't been there the last time I saw him. "Can he stay here tonight? Just until things cool down at home. He doesn't have anywhere else to go." Ethan looked up then, and I saw something in his dark brown eyes that almost made me say yes without thinking. Not just sadness, something raw and unguarded, the kind of vulnerability teenagers work hard to hide. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, swallowing whatever words he'd been about to say. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the clock ticking on the wall. My instincts kicked in hard. This was a kid who needed somewhere safe, and my son was asking me to give it to him. How could I turn that away? "Of course you can stay," I said. Relief flooded both boys' faces. Ethan's shoulders sagged like he'd been holding his breath for hours, and Tyler managed a small smile. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Johnson," Ethan said quietly, each word deliberate. "I really appreciate it. I promise I won't be any trouble." Something about his overly formal tone struck me as odd. Most teens would mumble, maybe crack a joke, but Ethan spoke like he was reading from a script. I brushed it off, chalked it up to exhaustion on my part. He just needed somewhere to sleep. I set him up on the couch with spare blankets and a pillow from the linen closet. He thanked me again in that same careful way, settling in like he was afraid to take up too much space. The boys played video games for a while, their voices low and even, a soft background hum while I finally ate my pasta. Around 10, I told them it was time to wind down. Early shift for me, summer school for Tyler. Ethan stood immediately, folding the blankets with almost obsessive neatness. "I'll be super quiet," he said earnestly, smoothing the couch cushions. "You won't even know I'm here." The way he said it made me feel guilty for finding it strange. He was just a scared kid trying to be perfect. By 11, I was upstairs, brushing my teeth and changing into pajamas. Tyler's room was next to mine. I heard him moving around, getting ready for bed. The house grew still except for the occasional creak of settling wood. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how proud I was of Tyler, for his compassion, for stepping up. At some point after midnight, exhaustion finally pulled me under. Around 3 in the morning, something stirred me from sleep. It wasn't a bang or crash, more like a muted thud, thud. The soft cadence of someone trying to walk quietly, but not quite succeeding. I lay still, my eyes open to the darkness, straining to listen. The sound came again. Footsteps, slow, steady, coming from downstairs. My first thought was that Ethan was just getting a drink of water or using the bathroom. I rolled over, willing myself back to sleep. But the steps didn't stop. For 10, maybe 15 minutes, they continued in this odd, deliberate rhythm. Pauses stretching just long enough to make my skin prickle before starting up again. It wasn't the casual shuffle of someone grabbing a snack. It was measured, methodical. I pictured him drifting from room to room, lingering, examining things. Probably just restless, I told myself. Teenagers get weird insomnia habits sometimes. But there was a precision in those pauses. A purpose that didn't feel right. Around 3:30, the sound finally ceased. Then came the faint groan of the couch springs settling. I waited a few more minutes, my pulse heavier than it should have been, before exhaustion pulled me back under. The smell of coffee woke me the next morning. When I came into the kitchen, Ethan was already dressed, hair combed, same clothes as the night before, but somehow neat and pressed. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," he said with that practiced smile. "I hope you don't mind, I made coffee. I wanted to thank you for letting me stay." It was perfect, balanced, not too strong, not too weak. He declined breakfast, saying he wasn't much of a morning eater, and packed his things with quiet efficiency. "I really can't tell you how much this meant to me," he said, shaking my hand like he was finalizing a deal. Tyler wandered in, bleary-eyed, and muttered, "Dude, you're up early." Ethan just shrugged. It wasn't until that afternoon, after another long shift, that I noticed something. I went to grab cash from my wallet to order pizza. Last night I'd had 3 20s, now there were 2. I stared, trying to recall if I'd spent one and forgotten. Possible, but unlikely. I checked my purse more thoroughly and my stomach turned. The emergency credit card I always kept tucked inside was gone. My pulse spiked as I dumped everything out on the bed, combing through receipts and coins. No card. I tried to reason it away. Maybe I left it at the hospital. But the missing cash combined with this felt like more than coincidence. Then another thought slammed into me. The medicine cabinet. I ran to the bathroom and yanked it open. My anxiety meds, completely gone. I'd just picked them up last week. The leftover pain pills from when I'd hurt my back. Half the bottle missing. I sat on the edge of the tub, my chest tightening. Someone had crept through my home, through my private spaces, taking what they wanted while I slept feet away. And that someone was the teenager I'd let in out of kindness. But the worst came next. We had a basic security system from the previous owners. Simple cameras, nothing fancy. I'd nearly forgotten about them. With shaking fingers, I opened the app and rewound to the night before. There he was, Ethan, in ghostly infrared at 3:17 a.m., moving through my house with calm, deliberate precision. He checked drawers, opened cabinets, sifted through my mail. Then the footage showed him going upstairs, past the bathroom, straight to my bedroom. He stood in my doorway motionless, watching me sleep. The seconds ticked by, each one making my skin crawl. Then he approached my dresser, rifled through my jewelry box, selecting what to take. 20 minutes. He was in my room for nearly 20 minutes. The final blow came when I decided to vacuum the couch. I lifted the cushions and froze. A knife, one of my sharp carving knives, tucked carefully between the cushions where he'd slept. Not dropped. Placed. My stomach turned. This wasn't just theft. He'd armed himself. The footsteps in the night hadn't just been him wandering. He'd been preparing. I called the police immediately, gave them the footage, the missing items, everything. They told me it was becoming common. Teens targeting single mothers, playing the part of a kid in trouble until the door was open. Ethan was arrested 3 days later when he tried to use my credit card at a gas station. He'd done this before several times. I was just the latest. I never saw him again. Tyler was gutted when he learned the truth about his friend. And I still think about those 20 minutes he spent standing in my doorway, watching me sleep. When you're grinding through long shifts and barely have the energy to nuke leftovers, the last thing you expect is to walk into a silence that feels arranged. Not the peaceful, end-of-day kind. More like someone hit pause on the world and is watching to see what you do next. At the time, I was living in a small 2-bedroom just outside Huntsville, Alabama. IT support for a manufacturing company, mostly remote, which meant my life was quiet, predictable, and lonely in a way I'd grown used to since the divorce a year earlier. The second bedroom had turned into a dumping ground for unopened Amazon boxes and a half-assembled elliptical that had been almost done for 8 months. The place wasn't much, but it was mine and it was safe. One afternoon at work, Marcus, a younger guy from my team, casually mentioned his cousin needed a place. "Just a few weeks," he said. "She's been through hell." That made me pause. He said her name was Jenna. I asked the usual: age, job, pets. He promised she was easygoing, clean, and just needed breathing room to figure things out. I'm not in the habit of letting strangers move in, but Marcus had always been solid. The way he said she's been through hell stuck with me. I told him to give her my number. She texted that night, polite, even punctuated properly. Said she was grateful, wouldn't be a burden, and could chip in for groceries. We set her move-in for that weekend. When she arrived, it was just her and 2 suitcases. She looked younger than I'd pictured, early 30s maybe. Dark blonde hair in a loose braid, oversized hoodie despite the heat. Her eyes scanned the hallway. Not nosy exactly, but like she was memorizing it. She thanked me more than once, accepted a short tour, and slipped into the spare room, shutting the door softly behind her. The first week was uneventful, maybe too quiet. She kept to herself, left early in the mornings before I logged in, and never had guests. Sometimes I'd hear her moving around late at night, or the microwave running at 2 a.m., but nothing weird enough to dwell on. Honestly, I was relieved she wasn't messy or loud. Then small things started shifting. The scissors from the junk drawer were gone. My half-full shampoo bottle was replaced by a brand new one. Same brand, but I hadn't bought it. My chipped college coffee mug vanished entirely. I told myself I was just forgetting where I'd put things. Work stress. Until one evening, I opened the fridge and saw my labeled container of leftover chili was gone. I'd been saving it for lunch the next day. I didn't say anything, made a sandwich instead, but I started keeping mental tabs. A few days later, I came home to find the hallway closet light on and the attic hatch slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it in over a year. That one stopped me cold. The next morning, over coffee, I asked, "Hey, did you go into the hallway closet yesterday?" The attic hatch was open. She blinked once, quick. "Oh, I didn't even know there was an attic." Then she turned and went back to her room. No questions, no curiosity. That unsettled me more than the hatch itself. A few nights later, passing her room, I noticed the door open a crack. The light was on. I could hear something, too soft to be TV or music, like faint whispering. It stopped the second I paused. I assumed she was on a late call and kept walking, forcing myself not to linger like some creep in my own hallway. The next morning, there was something on the kitchen table. A photograph. Me, my sister, and my niece at a pumpkin patch 2 years ago. I kept all my old photos in a sealed bin in the hall closet. This one had a damp fingerprint smudge near the edge. I put it back without a word. 2 days later, I came home and found Jenna at the dining table, looking at her phone. She turned it face down the instant she saw me, like a reflex. I said, "Hey." She looked up from her phone. "Hey," she replied, casual, like everything was normal. When she got up to grab something from the kitchen, she left her phone on the table. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity, maybe a gut punch of unease finally surfacing, but I glanced at the screen. Her notifications were still visible. My stomach knotted. There, plain as day, was a thumbnail of the pumpkin patch photo, the one I'd found on the table. Then another, my parents' backyard, a summer barbecue years ago. Then one from my high school graduation. None of these were online. I'd never posted them, never scanned them. My throat went dry. Against better judgment, I tapped the screen. It opened to her photo gallery. They weren't screenshots, they were files. Saved, stored, mine. She came back into the room while I was still staring at the images. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out strained. "Why do you have pictures of my family on your phone?" Jenna froze mid-step, blinked like I'd just spoken in another language. "I don't." "What are you talking about?" I turned the phone toward her. The screen had locked. I pressed the power button and it asked for a passcode. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she just looked at me and said, calm but flat, "I think you're tired. You've been working too much." That was it. She walked down the hall, closed her door, and I heard the lock click. I barely slept that night. Every sound seemed magnified. The creak of floorboards, the fridge humming, the wind brushing the siding. Around 3 a.m., I got up for water. In the hallway, her door was still closed, no light seeping from underneath. That's when I saw it. The attic hatch was open again, wider this time. I stood there, staring at the black square overhead, weighing whether I was going to be brave or smart. I picked neither. I backed into my room, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the knob. I don't care how paranoid that sounds. I wasn't about to climb into my own attic in the middle of the night while someone who lied about family photos was sleeping 10 feet away. The next morning, she was gone. Not just out for coffee, gone. Her room was half empty, bed stripped, one suitcase missing, closet door ajar. Inside, a pair of flip-flops, a stained hoodie, an empty tote bag. In the top dresser drawer, I found a folded piece of notebook paper. No greeting, no signature, just one shaky line. "You didn't lock it fast enough." I don't know what it meant. Still don't. After she left, I checked the attic, climbed up with my phone light trembling in my hand. Candy wrappers, a throw blanket, one of my old hoodies. She'd been spending time up there. For how long? No idea. I called Marcus. He sounded genuinely shocked. Said he hadn't spoken to Jenna in over a year, since she'd started acting off after her divorce. When I told him what happened, there was a pause, then, "Dude, her name's not Jenna. Her real name is Emily. Jenna was her ex-wife. It took me a second to process. He explained that after the divorce, Emily started using Jenna's name online, told his aunt she wanted a fresh start, didn't want her ex to find her, claimed she'd been through something traumatic. Nobody knew details. She just kept drifting, never staying anywhere long. I changed the locks that afternoon, installed cameras the next day. I don't use the spare room anymore. I keep the door shut, empty. Nothing's gone missing since. No strange photos have surfaced, but I still check the attic hatch every night before bed. I never figured out how she got those pictures, or what else she might have done while I was working in the other room. All I know is, I let someone in without knowing who they really were, and she didn't just move in, she moved in like she already belonged there, like she'd been waiting for someone to leave the door open. Running a bed and breakfast in small-town Maine wasn't exactly the dream life I'd pictured when I inherited Grandma's Victorian 5 years ago. At 34, I'd been running the Willowbrook Inn mostly alone since the divorce, scraping by on weekend tourists and the occasional business traveler. Most days were predictable: fresh linens, coffee, and muffins at 7 a.m., polite small talk with guests who'd be gone by Sunday. That was until September 2021, when one particular guest stepped in on a humid Thursday evening and quietly rearranged my life. She came with nothing but a worn leather duffel bag and a thick envelope of cash, enough to pay for 3 months up front. "Helen Carpenter," she said, her voice calm, deliberate, each word spaced like she was making sure it landed right. Something in the way she spoke told me she'd been through hell and was holding herself together with sheer will. She looked mid to late 40s, graying brown hair in a neat bun, wearing understated but expensive clothes, the sort of person you'd expect to find teaching piano to neighborhood kids or shelving books at a library. She explained she was in a transition, needed somewhere quiet to think. When she slid $3,600 in crisp hundreds onto my desk and asked for the corner room upstairs for 12 weeks, I said yes before she finished the sentence. The roof repairs weren't going to pay for themselves. The first few weeks, she was practically invisible. She stayed in room 7, coming out only around midnight to make tea in the upstairs kitchenette I'd installed years ago. I'd sometimes hear faint classical music, always the same sad piece I couldn't place, floating down through the old floorboards. She never touched breakfast, never lounged on the porch, never asked about the town. Just the occasional soft footsteps above my apartment and a polite nod in the hallway, her pale blue eyes always sliding away before meeting mine. Things shifted in early December. Holiday bookings had begun, and the first to speak up were the Hendersons, a friendly retired couple from Boston. Saturday morning, while I was arranging flowers, Mrs. Henderson leaned in and whispered. We heard voices from room 7, around 3 a.m. She glanced toward the staircase. 2 people talking. No, arguing. One was Helen, but the other... She lowered her voice further. Deeper, meaner. She claimed the argument went on for nearly an hour before ending with the sound of something heavy scraping across the floor. I smiled like it was nothing. Told her old houses carry sound, maybe a late-night movie. But her words stuck with me. I'd noticed Helen's midnight tea runs had turned into trips carrying large Tupperware containers back to her room. When I'd asked if she needed more fridge space, she just smiled and said, "I'm fine, thank you." The next week, the Yamamoto family arrived, complaining of a sweet, cloying smell near room 7. Like flowers left in water too long, they said, but stronger, worse. I walked the hallway, catching only the faintest trace, overripe fruit, maybe a stale air freshener. But the complaints didn't stop. The Millers lost toiletries and prescription pills overnight. The Kowalskis reported scratching inside the walls of room 6 right next to Helen's, the sound coming and going through their whole stay. Then came the Patels, across the hall from Helen. On checkout morning, Mr. Patel pulled me aside, pale and tense. "My wife saw someone," he said, "standing in Helen's doorway at 4 in the morning, just watching our door." When Mrs. Patel got up an hour later, she found wet footprints leading from room 7 to the shared bathroom. Not shoe prints, bare feet, but too long, distorted. By January, bookings were tanking. Word spreads fast here, and online reviews mentioned disturbances and unsettling atmosphere. I told myself to talk to Helen, but each time I reached her door, my hand froze halfway to the knock. The rent she paid was keeping the place alive. And she was still polite, though thinner now, skin pale enough to see veins, voice rasping. She licked her lips constantly, eyes flicking toward guests as she asked strange questions. When they went to bed, whether they were heavy sleepers, if they traveled with valuables. It all broke on a bitter Wednesday in mid-January, when I woke to find 2 police cruisers idling outside the inn. Officer Bradley Thompson, who I'd known since high school, stood on my porch with that grim, tight-lipped look cops get when they're about to say something you can't unhear. He told me they'd had multiple reports about suspicious activity at the inn. Mrs. Henderson had called from Boston, remembering that one night she'd seen Helen in the parking lot, standing beside another guest's car holding what looked like a key. She hadn't thought much of it then. The Yamamoto family had also contacted them after finding their credit card information compromised just days after checking out, fraudulent charges popping up fast. Bradley asked if I'd noticed anything strange about Helen. Standing there in my bathrobe, I started recounting the months of bizarre, unsettling incidents I'd shrugged off, and the words felt like bricks stacking up in my chest. I realized how blind I'd been, how much I'd wanted to be blind. When the officers left, promising to return for a formal statement, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I climbed the stairs, my master key trembling in my hand. As I neared room 7, the hallway was thick with that sweet, rotting odor the guests had complained about, so strong now it burned my eyes. I knocked. Helen? No answer. The silence was wrong. No music, no creak of movement, not even the faint presence of breath. I slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open. The smell hit me like a slap, forcing me to bury my nose in my sleeve. The room was stripped bare of personal belongings, as though she'd never existed here at all, except for the 3 large plastic containers stacked in the corner, sealed with duct tape and marked with dates from the last 4 months. I opened the first one. Inside were driver's licenses, credit cards, and personal effects I recognized immediately. Mrs. Miller's pill bottle, Mr. Kowalski's expensive watch, jewelry from at least half a dozen other women. Beneath those were hundreds of photographs, guests sleeping, undressing, showering, shot through windows, every image labeled with names, room numbers, and disturbingly detailed personal notes. The second container was worse in a different way, typed logs of guest routines, copies of their keys, strange electronic devices I didn't recognize, likely credit card skimmers and hidden cameras. But the third container, that's the one that still twists my stomach. Clothing, underwear, small, intimate items stolen while people slept. Vials containing hair and nail clippings, each tagged with dates and names. I called Bradley, my voice shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. Within an hour, the second floor swarmed with investigators, forensic techs, detectives. They treated the place like a crime scene because it was one. Her real name wasn't Helen Carpenter. It was Beverly Walsh, a career criminal with a history of identity theft, stalking, and burglary across multiple states. She'd been using my inn as her base, harvesting everything she could from every guest, stealing their identities, selling their most private images on the dark web. The most chilling part came when they tore apart the walls of room 7. She'd drilled dozens of pinholes into the adjoining rooms, threading wires and creating tiny vantage points. The Kowalskis' scratching noises hadn't been in the walls. They'd been Beverly herself, crawling through narrow spaces she'd carved out, slipping into rooms to steal from people while they slept. The fallout gutted me. 23 former guests came forward as victims. Lawsuits piled up, accusing me of negligence. Every trace of Beverly's modifications had to be ripped out, costing nearly everything I'd saved. They caught her 3 states away using one of my guests' credit cards. She got 15 years. But the prison sentence didn't erase the truth. I'd chosen not to act. I'd traded safety for steady rent, ignored every instinct screaming that something was wrong. The Willowbrook Inn closed for good 6 months later. I moved into a small apartment downtown. Still, some nights I wake gasping, the phantom smell of rot in my nose, the memory of those photos crowding my mind. And I wonder how many others are doing what I did, convincing themselves that silence means safety, when it's the loudest warning of all. I was 22 when this happened, still a senior at Ohio State, driving back home to Cincinnati for the weekend. It was early October, one of those nights when the rain doesn't just fall, it punishes you, hammering the windshield like it's got a personal grudge. I'd left campus too late, got caught in the storm halfway through, and now the road felt like the loneliest place in Ohio. Just me, my battered Honda, and the occasional freight truck tearing past in the opposite lane, their headlights slicing through the dark like brief angry ghosts. I wasn't in any rush. I had a podcast playing low, a half-empty bag of beef jerky on the passenger seat, and a thermos of coffee I'd already drained. I was tired, but wired. My eyes were gritty, my hands restless on the wheel, and all I wanted was to push through the last hour of the drive. That's when I first saw him. Around 11:30 p.m., maybe a little later. He was standing just off the shoulder beneath one of those weathered green highway signs whose letters have faded to the color of old moss. At first, I thought he was just a trick of the rain and my headlights, maybe a fence post or a tree stump. But as I got closer, he resolved into a man clutching a duffel bag, one arm raised, not quite waving, not quite shielding his face from the rain. Something about the way he stood, utterly still in that violent downpour, made me instinctively ease off the gas. I don't usually stop for hitchhikers. I've always told myself it's not worth the risk. But that night, I don't know. Something in me shifted. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was that raw edge the storm had carved into my nerves. Maybe I just didn't want to be alone. I rolled down the passenger side window. Rain blew in sideways. "You okay out here?" I called. He looked about mid-60s, face lined and weathered like old leather, gray hair plastered to his forehead. His flannel shirt was soaked through, clinging to his frame like a second skin. He didn't smile, didn't say much at all, just nodded and said, in a voice so flat it was almost a murmur, "Car broke down, couple miles back, headed to a motel off exit 212. "Got a name?" I asked. "Ray," he said. Just Ray. No last name. There was a strange hesitation before he got in, like he was making sure I was real. Then he opened the door, tossed in the dripping duffel, and slid into the seat. He didn't even shiver. The smell that came with him was odd. Not just rain and damp clothes, but something deeper. Wet pine, faint smoke, and that dry, musty scent of an attic that's been sealed for decades. The next 20 minutes were silent. Ray didn't ask where I was headed, didn't thank me, didn't move much at all. His hands were folded neatly in his lap, eyes fixed on the black smear of the road ahead. Every time lightning lit the sky, I glanced over. He never reacted, never blinked, just sat there like he was waiting for something I couldn't see. I tried asking a few things, where exactly his car was, if he'd called anyone, but his answers were clipped and vague. "It's back there. Don't have a phone. Just need a place to sleep." The way he said it, mechanical, almost rehearsed, scraped against something in me. Still, I told myself he was probably just cold, shaken, maybe embarrassed. When I pulled into the Edgeway Motel, a sad little strip of flickering neon and maybe 5 cars in the lot, he unbuckled without a word, just opened the door, grabbed his bag, and walked toward the office without looking back. I was about to pull out when I noticed something on the floor by the passenger seat. A wallet. Dark brown leather, cracked at the edges, one corner soaked from the rain. Ray must have dropped it getting out. I didn't think twice. I threw the car in reverse and parked near the office again. Honestly, part of me felt relieved to have a reason to go back. That exit felt strange the moment I'd taken it, and I hadn't liked the way he'd left. And maybe, I was curious. The lobby was dim, reeking of bleach and cigarette smoke. A tarnished bell sat on the desk. I tapped it once. A short woman in her 50s came from the back, looking like she'd been holding this place together by sheer willpower. "I just dropped off a guy named Ray," I said, holding up the wallet. "Think he forgot this." She tilted her head, frowning. "What room's he in?" "Not sure," I said. "But he walked in, maybe 5 minutes ago." Something in her face changed. She went pale, just for a second, and then stepped back like I'd said something dangerous. "What did he look like?" she asked. I gave the description: older guy, gray flannel, gray hair, mid-60s, duffel bag, quiet. She stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then she gave a nervous, almost incredulous laugh. "You're joking." "I'm not," I said. She leaned over the counter, her voice dropping low. "We haven't had anyone by that." The clerk's voice dropped to a near whisper. "No one matching that description has checked in here for months," she said. "And the last person who did disappeared." A chill worked its way up my spine, cold enough to make me swallow before I could speak. She turned and disappeared into the back room. When she came out, she was holding a worn, overstuffed folder, the kind that looks like it's been handled too many times. She flipped it open, and inside was what looked like an incident report. Taped to the page was a printed photo, grainy, but clear enough. My throat went dry the second I saw it. Same face, same shirt, same duffel bag. It was Ray. "No," I said, shaking my head so hard I almost laughed. "That's not possible. I just dropped him off. He was in my car 20 minutes ago." But the clerk only kept shaking her head. "That man vanished 3 months ago," she said. "His car was found abandoned off the highway, no sign of him. Police searched the woods, dragged the river. Nothing. Not a trace." I must have looked unhinged, trying to explain myself. My hands fumbled for the one thing that could prove I wasn't making it all up. I pulled the wallet from my jacket pocket and set it on the counter. That's when it got worse. The ID inside was old, so old the laminate had yellowed, issued in the late 80s. The photo was Ray, but younger. Different haircut, fewer lines on his face, but the same eyes, the same rigid stare. Something in me recoiled, an instinct I couldn't name. Suddenly I didn't want to be holding it anymore. It didn't feel found. It felt left. I slid it toward her. She didn't want to touch it either, but eventually she fetched a plastic bag, slipped the wallet inside, and tied the end in a knot. "I'll call the sheriff in the morning," she said. Back in my car, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened. The passenger seat was still damp where he'd sat. The rain had stopped, but the world seemed muted. Just buzzing neon, the low hum of my engine. I sat there for a long minute, watching the motel door, waiting for him to step out. He never did. No movement behind the curtains, no footsteps, just stillness. Driving away felt wrong, like walking out of a room before the conversation was over. My rearview mirror became a trap for my eyes. I kept glancing at it, half expecting to see him sitting in the back seat, silent, staring. But it was always empty. The highway felt off. The exits and curves were familiar, but stretched somehow like a photograph taken from the wrong angle. I kept trying to tell myself it was just coincidence, a weird overlap of faces, dates, and bad weather. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was the sense that for those 20 minutes I'd stepped into a story that wasn't mine, that Ray, whoever, whatever he was, had borrowed my presence just long enough to reach wherever he needed to go, and then vanished. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there in the dark, replaying it all, the silence, the clipped answers, the way he never once looked directly at me. It felt less like he'd been traveling with me, and more like he'd been passing through. A few days later, I called the Edgeway Motel. The clerk remembered me. She said she'd turned the wallet over to the sheriff's department, but then she told me something that made my skin crawl all over again. They said the ID wasn't in the system. No record of the name, no address, nothing. It was as if Ray had never officially existed. It's been almost 2 years now. I still think about him, especially on long, empty drives when rain starts to tap against the windshield the same way it did that night. I never saw Ray again. But sometimes when I pass an old motel or spot someone standing alone by the highway, I catch myself wondering, was he really a ghost? Or just someone who slipped through a crack in the world that the rest of us can't see? I don't know, but I've never picked up another hitchhiker since. I'm Mark, 34 now, but this happened when I was 29. Back then, my wife Olivia and I had just left Idaho after visiting her sister, driving back home to Colorado. We decided to take the Wyoming route. It was late when we left, around 10:30 p.m., because we figured the roads would be empty and we'd make good time. For a while, that plan worked. Life was simple then. No kids yet. Just us, our golden retriever Daisy curled up in the back seat, and the comfortable rhythm of a marriage not yet tested by anything truly frightening. If you'd asked me that morning what the scariest thing in my life was, I probably would have said taxes. I had no idea that by the end of the night, I'd never look at an empty highway the same way again. It was close to midnight when it started, somewhere not far from a little town called Rollins. If you've driven through Wyoming at night, you know the kind of emptiness I'm talking about. No streetlights, just cracked asphalt stretching into blackness and maybe a flash of glowing animal eyes in the brush. We were 40 minutes past the last gas station when Olivia noticed headlights in the rear view. At first, we thought nothing of it. Rare to see another vehicle, but not impossible. Then the shape of the vehicle came into focus. A black pickup, older model, maybe a Dodge or Ford, closing in fast. No lane change, no turn signal. Just barreling straight up behind us and staying there. So close it felt like it was trying to crawl into our trunk. I tapped my brakes lightly. A quick, "I see you" signal. Nothing. The truck didn't slow down. Instead, its high beams snapped on, flooding our car with a harsh white glare that made every shadow in the cabin vanish. Olivia twisted in her seat, shielding her eyes. "What is this guy's problem?" "Road rage, probably," I muttered, forcing my voice to stay calm. I flipped my blinker, eased onto the shoulder to let him pass. He didn't. He slowed with us, staying exactly where he was, an unmoving shadow with blinding lights. I waved him forward. Still nothing. The heavy hum of his engine seemed to thrum through my chest. My jaw tightened. I pulled back onto the road and sped up, 60, 70, pushing 80. But every increase I made, he matched. Always the same distance. Always those lights burning into us. By now, Olivia was fully turned around in her seat, straining to make out his face. But the glare was a wall. No plate, no silhouette, no driver. Just the square glow of those headlights, unblinking. It stopped feeling like a bad driver and started feeling like something else. The next exit appeared like a lifeline, a narrow 2-lane back road heading east. I took it without hesitation, thinking if it was just coincidence, he'd keep going straight. He didn't. His headlights swung right along with us. No pause. "Mark." Olivia's voice was low, almost flat. "He's following us." Something about the way she said it, like a truth settling into place, sent a cold rush through me. This road had nothing. No houses, no signs, just flat land, endless fences, and rusting barbed wire cutting across the fields. I tried calling 911. No bars. Olivia checked hers. Nothing. I stared at those empty signal lines like they might change if I willed it hard enough. That's when the truck did something that made my blood run colder than the air outside. The headlights vanished. One moment they were there, the next, just blackness, no glow, no sound of an engine. Where did he go? Olivia's fingers dug into my arm. I didn't answer. I didn't know. I eased off the gas, scanning the dark behind us. For a second, I let myself think maybe he'd turned off, then, bam, headlights again. Only this time they were much closer, and I hadn't heard him approach. He must have coasted in the dark. No lights, no sound, just waiting. My pulse slammed in my ears. I floored it and yanked the wheel hard right onto a dirt road I didn't recognize. The tires crunched into gravel, a cloud of dust exploding in our wake. Daisy barked frantically from the back seat. I didn't care where the road went. I just needed it to go somewhere else. The dirt path wound through what looked like abandoned ranch land. Tall, dry grass whipped against the sides of the car. Fence posts flashed past like jagged teeth. In the rear view, the truck was still there. Closer now. Olivia was shaking, tears pooling in her eyes. "Do something, Mark. Please." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But what was there to do? No service, no buildings. Just us and a truck that clearly didn't want to talk. I swerved hard, hoping to throw him off. He swerved with me, perfectly in sync, like he knew my moves before I made them. Then I saw it, a break in the barbed wire ahead. The fence had collapsed in one section, like some old tractor had busted through years ago. I didn't think. I just cranked the wheel and went for it. The car bounced violently over ruts and dry earth. Olivia screamed. Something heavy from the back seat flew into the front. Daisy yelped, claws scrambling against the seat as she tried to keep her balance. I barely had time to glance back before my stomach dropped. The truck had followed us without hesitation, plowing straight through the same gap in the fence. Dust billowed up behind it like smoke from something burning. That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't random. Whoever was driving that thing wasn't just stubborn, they were committed. We tore across what looked like an old cattle field. Even in the frantic blur of headlights and shadows, I caught flashes of pale bone littering the ground. I swear I saw a cow skull half buried in the dirt, its hollow eyes reflecting faint light as we passed. An old windmill stood ahead, its rusted blades turning slow and uneven in the wind, like it was mocking the panic in our car. A dirt path veered left toward a dark line of trees. I floored it, feeling every brutal jolt through the steering column and into my bones. But the truck was still there. I couldn't see it clearly anymore, but I could feel it. The same way prey feels the predator behind it. It wasn't closing in yet. It was circling, drawing this out, making sure we understood who was in control. Then, hope, or something pretending to be it. A sagging wooden structure appeared out of the darkness, maybe an old barn or feed shed, leaning on itself like it had been abandoned decades ago. I cut the wheel and slid in behind it, gravel spitting out under the tires. I killed the engine and lights in one motion. Olivia clutched Daisy to her chest, her sobs muffled against the dog's fur. I heard her whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since her mom's funeral, her voice trembling like the air between us. We waited. Nothing. No engine. No footsteps. Just the whistle of the wind and the faint groan of that damned windmill in the distance. The silence felt thick, almost physical, like it was pressing against my eardrums. I cracked my window. Still nothing. My heart pounded so hard it was almost embarrassing. I told Olivia I was going to take a look. She grabbed my sleeve with a grip so tight it hurt. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I have to," I whispered. She didn't answer, just stared at me with wet, terrified eyes, until I slowly slipped free of her grip. The cold night air hit me like I'd stepped into an ice bath. My boots sank into the soft dirt as I crept along the side of the structure, every step careful, deliberate. I edged to the corner and peeked out. There it was, the black truck. It sat maybe 50 yards away, engine off, headlights dark. But inside, in the bed of the truck, was a faint red glow, like the tip of a cigarette. Only it wasn't in the driver's seat. It was further back, low, like someone was sitting cross-legged in the bed, just watching. I don't know if it was a person. I don't know if it was human. But the stillness of it made my skin crawl. The way it didn't move, didn't shift or react. It felt less like I was looking at a man and more like I was looking at a trap. I backed away as slowly as I could, each step feeling like it took a full minute. My breath stayed shallow, like even exhaling too loud might draw its attention. When I slid back into the car, Olivia looked at me like she already knew the answer. "He's just sitting there," I whispered. She stared. "What does that mean?" I had no answer. We stayed put for maybe another 10 minutes, barely breathing. The truck didn't move, no engine, no lights. Just that single, stubborn red glow hanging in the dark like an ember that refused to die. Finally, Olivia spoke. "We should run for it." Every instinct I had screamed that leaving the car was worse, but the gas gauge was kissing empty, and I knew we couldn't sit there until sunrise. I remembered passing a ranch sign maybe 5 miles back before we'd left the road. We decided to try. We took Daisy, our phones, and a flashlight, and slipped out the opposite side of the barn, avoiding the truck entirely. The field felt endless. Every few steps, my mind conjured shapes in the dark, holes big enough to break a leg, a snake nest hidden in the grass, or worse. Every sound made us whip our heads around. Every gust of wind felt like it carried a whisper just behind our ears. After what felt like hours, though it could only have been one, we saw it. A single dim porch light in the distance, steady, unmoving. We ran. It was an old farmhouse, weathered but cared for. An older couple answered, eyes widening at the sight of us. They ushered us in without a single question. The husband, Jim, handed me the landline, and I called the sheriff. Explaining it out loud made it sound insane. A truck with no plates, no driver we could see, chasing us through nowhere. The sheriff arrived about 40 minutes later. He drove out to the field, came back saying there was nothing, no truck, no tire tracks, no broken fence, nothing at all. To this day, I don't know who or what was behind that wheel. Maybe it was someone messing with us. Maybe it was something else entirely. I do know this. I've never driven through Wyoming at night again. Olivia still wakes up sometimes, shaking, mumbling about the red glow. And me? Sometimes I still jolt awake in the dark, sure I can hear tires crunching slowly across gravel outside the house, like whatever was in that truck is still out there, waiting for the next couple to take the wrong exit on the wrong stretch of highway. I was 32 when it happened. Early September, the kind of sticky Texas heat that makes your shirt glue itself to your back before you've even had your morning coffee. I'd just started a solo road trip after walking away from a soul-sucking job and an even worse breakup back in Austin. I wasn't out here to find myself or any of that romantic nonsense. I just needed to get away from people for a while. No real destination, just a vague plan of hitting a few state parks and maybe checking out Marfa if I got that far. My ride was a second-hand Ford Escape, still smelling faintly of the previous owner's cigarette habit, and a cooler wedged in the back seat full of snacks and lukewarm soda. I had the kind of restlessness that makes you take detours just to see what's down a road you've never driven before. That morning, I'd been on the road since 7 a.m., the low hum of the highway keeping my thoughts at bay. The only stop I made was for gas, at a faded little station near a place called Pottet. The sign was so bleached by the sun, it looked like a ghost of whatever logo it used to be. One pump worked. The other was cocooned in yellow caution tape, swaying a little in the warm breeze. The attached convenience store was tiny, its air thick with the smell of old motor oil, powdered donuts, and something faintly metallic. As I topped off my tank, I saw her. She was standing off to the side near a silver sedan with its hood up, arms crossed tight over her chest. Strands of damp hair clung to her face in the heat. At first I thought she was just a local dealing with car trouble, but she wasn't even looking at the engine. Her gaze kept darting up and down the road, sharp and jerky, like she was waiting for someone, or bracing for them. Dark green hoodie, despite the heat. Fingers twitching like she couldn't stand still. I told myself to mind my business. I don't pick up strangers, not my thing. But when I stepped inside the store, she followed. I was paying for a bottle of water when her voice cut in, soft but sudden. "You heading west?" I froze. Something in me whispered, "Lie. Say no. Say you're going back the other way." But my head nodded before I could stop it. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Said her name was Rachel. Offered me $20 for a ride to a town about an hour away, somewhere off Route 90. I told her to keep her money. I'm not sure why. Maybe guilt, maybe the look in her eyes, haunted and hollow. We got on the road. She barely spoke, just clutched a battered canvas tote like it was all she had left in the world. As the miles slid by, she loosened up a fraction, but only just. Every time a big pickup truck passed, she'd flinch and check the rear window. After half an hour of silence, I finally asked, "Is someone after you?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "If a man named Curtis shows up, don't tell him you saw me." Her voice cracked on his name. My stomach sank. I didn't push for details. I didn't need to. I'd worked at a women's shelter years ago. I'd seen that kind of fear before. I'd been hoping she was just someone with bad luck and a dead battery. But now, this was worse. "I don't know Curtis," I told her, "but you're safe with me." I meant it. I didn't realize then how wrong I'd be, that Curtis was already looking for her, and helping her would pull me into something far darker than I'd ever imagined. We rolled into a diner around 1 p.m., the kind with a metal roof, faded Coca-Cola signs in the windows, and a parking lot that crunched under your shoes. The place was called Gertie's, and only 3 cars sat outside. It felt quiet, safe. Rachel hadn't said much since bringing up Curtis. Inside, the air smelled of fried food and burnt coffee. A waitress with dyed red hair and laugh lines that didn't look much used seated us in a booth by the window. Rachel ordered fries she didn't touch. I tried to lighten the mood, tossing out small talk, but her attention kept drifting to the door. The tension was back in her shoulders, radiating like static in the air. I made the mistake of leaving her alone, just to run to the bathroom. I swear I wasn't gone 5 minutes. When I came back, the booth was empty. Her tote bag was still there. My stomach dropped. Through the window, I spotted her by the payphone at the edge of the lot. A man stood 10 feet from her, broad-shouldered, denim jacket, balding. Even from behind, he radiated a kind of meanness. The way he leaned toward her, looming, made my chest go tight. I stepped outside, trying to keep my voice even. "Everything okay?" The man turned. His eyes were flat, cold. "Just talking to my wife," he said. Rachel's eyes met mine, and she shook her head. Just once. Small. Sharp. "Don't." "She's with me," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "You picked her up?" His tone made it sound like a fact, not a question, like someone had told him already. "Yeah," I said, gripping her tote. His gaze flicked down to it. Something ugly passed over his face before he forced a smile. It didn't touch his eyes. "Thanks for taking care of her," he said. "I'll take it from here." And then Rachel ran. Not toward me, toward the back of the diner. I didn't think. I just ran after her. Behind me, I heard him curse, boots pounding the gravel. We rounded the side of the building. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. Behind the diner was a scrappy patch of trees and a drainage ditch. Rachel didn't hesitate. She slid down the slope, nearly twisting her ankle, then disappeared into the brush. I tore after her, branches clawing at my arms, spider webs breaking across my face, trying to keep sight of that dark green hoodie darting ahead. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was choking me. Behind us, his voice cut through the trees, closer than I wanted to believe, maybe 20 seconds back. maybe less. And I knew in that instant, with a sick certainty, that if he caught us, this wouldn't end with shouting. I'd seen men like him before. I knew exactly what they were capable of. The woods behind the diner weren't much, just a narrow strip of trees and snarled undergrowth between two properties. But we pushed deeper. I kept expecting to break out into someone's backyard or smack into a fence, but it just kept going. Branches slapped against my face, snagged at my shirt. My legs burned trying to keep up with Rachel. She ran like she'd done it before, like every turn and stumble was muscle memory. After what felt like forever, maybe 5 minutes, we dropped down into a dry creek bed. Broken beer bottles glittered in the dirt, cigarette packs flattened and damp. We ducked under a fallen tree, crouching low, breathing hard enough to make my chest ache. Rachel's hands were trembling so badly I thought she might pass out. I leaned toward her, whispering, "Was that him?" She didn't look at me, just bit her lip until it broke and nodded once. We stayed like that, pressed into the dirt, listening. No footsteps, no branches snapping. Maybe we'd lost him. Maybe he'd given up. But Rachel was still staring dead ahead, her whole body locked like she was bracing for a bullet. "He has a tracker," she whispered finally, her voice so thin I almost didn't hear it. "I didn't think he'd use it." The words hit me like a gut punch. "What kind of tracker?" She didn't answer right away. Then she reached into the hoodie pocket and pulled out a phone I hadn't seen before. "Not mine," she said, her voice shaking. "His. I thought I ditched it yesterday. He must have planted another." And just like that, I understood why he'd found us so fast. That cold smile at the diner, it hadn't been surprise. It had been confirmation. "Get rid of it," I told her. She nodded, then whipped her arm and flung the phone so hard it cracked against a rock in the creek bed. Then she dug into her tote bag and pulled out another phone. I didn't ask where she got it. I didn't want to know. We stayed hidden a little longer, until the silence felt real, not just like a pause in the chase. Then we moved, keeping to the tree line until we found an abandoned trailer, busted out windows, a rusting satellite dish leaning off its mount. Rachel crawled underneath and shoved her tote deep into the shadows. "If he finds me again," she whispered, "at least he won't get this." I didn't ask what was in the bag. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "We'll get you somewhere safe," I told her. I meant it. We cut across scrubland until we reached the edge of a service road. My keys were still in my pocket. Thank God I'd left the car locked. We circled wide, coming up on the diner from the opposite side, scanning for any sign of that denim jacket. Nothing. Either he'd gone inside or taken off, thinking she'd run the other way. I hit the unlock button from 20 feet out. We sprinted for the car like we were breaking out of prison. Once we were back on the road, I didn't speak for 10 miles. Neither did she. My hands were clamped to the wheel, trembling so badly I had to flex them to keep control. I've had anxiety before, but this was different. This wasn't fear. It was rage. Rage that a man like him could walk into a parking lot in broad daylight, speak like he owned her, and leave without anyone stopping him. We didn't slow down until we hit Hondo, a bigger town with more traffic, more eyes. I pulled into the police station lot ready to march her inside, but her hand shot out, gripping my arm. "No cops," she said, panic sparking in her voice. "He's a volunteer firefighter. They know him here. They won't help me." Her voice cracked and I believed her. Curtis hadn't looked at her like an angry boyfriend. He'd looked at her like property, like someone he knew he could drag back without anyone asking questions. So I did the only thing I could think of. I drove her to a small, run-down motel just outside of town. Paid in cash. We picked a fake name for her. I gave her my backup phone, scribbled down every shelter and hotline I could remember from my old job. I couldn't stay. I knew that. But I wasn't leaving her with nothing. Before I left, she hugged me. Sudden, tight, trembling. "You didn't have to stop," she whispered. "Most people wouldn't have." I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. I'm glad I did. And I meant it, even with the fear. even with the chaos. That night, I drove another 100 miles before I let myself pull over and cry. I didn't know if Curtis was still looking for her, or if he'd slunk back to whatever place let him act like a king. But I knew Rachel was smart, and she wasn't alone anymore, not really, she had a chance. A few weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. I made it. Thank you. No name, no location. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. I didn't need to reply. I just needed to know. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know what happened to Curtis, and I hope I never do. But every time I stop for gas in a small town, I remember her face. The panic, the strength under it, the silence she wore like armor. And I wonder how many women are out there right now, running, hiding, praying for a stranger to slow down. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to pick someone up off the side of the road, but I did. And I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't, if I'd just kept driving, what she'd already survived, what she might not have. And I'll never forget the look in Curtis's eyes when he realized she was slipping away. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Because for once, someone got away, and I hope to God she stays gone. Back in late September 2019, I was working nights as a delivery driver for one of those third-party apps. I'd just moved to Nashville after dropping out of college, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. Nothing glamorous. Most of my nights were spent dropping off burgers and wings to drunk college kids or exhausted nurses halfway through a double shift. The kind of job that gives you way too much time to think and nowhere near enough money to stop worrying. That night it was pushing 11:30 p.m., and I'd already decided I was done after one last drop. I'd just handed off an order at a roadside motel near the interstate when my phone pinged. A decent payout, but the address was way out there. 40 minutes outside the city, technically still in the delivery zone, but it might as well have been another state. No gate code, no delivery instructions, just a customer name. D. Monroe. And an address on a back road I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Orders usually popped up closer to downtown where you could see the skyline and the streetlights didn't just end. This one was the opposite, out toward the kind of country roads where the air feels heavier and the dark feels older. But I was tired, low on gas and ready to be done, so I hit accept, swung by a 24-hour diner for the pickup, and started the drive. The first leg was normal. Few turns off the highway, past a couple of closed gas stations and dark subdivisions. Then the streetlights thinned out until there weren't any. My high beams lit up more bugs than asphalt, and the road narrowed until it felt like the trees were pressing in, their branches tangled overhead. The GPS started acting up, lagging, spinning, rerouting me for no reason. My music cut out, leaving just the hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel when I hit the occasional shoulder. Finally, the GPS voice announced, "You have arrived." But there was no house, just a dirt driveway, barely wide enough for a single car, disappearing into the woods. I sat there, foot on the brake, double-checking the screen. Same address. No mistake. The house had to be at the end. I eased in slowly, the gravel popping under my tires. Branches scraped along the sides of my car, the sound too close, too sharp. No mailbox, no lights, just darkness thick enough to feel. After a couple of tight bends, I saw it. A farmhouse, tucked far back. Chipped white paint flaking off in big curls, roof sagging like it was exhaling its last breath. No porch light, no vehicles, no sound but my own engine. I pulled up, shut the car off, but left the headlights on. I can't explain why. Something in me just didn't want to lose the light. The air outside was damp and heavy, carrying that swampy, rotting wood smell you get near creeks. The porch steps sagged under my weight, boards creaking in protest. I knocked once. Nothing. Knocked again, harder, and called, "Delivery for Monroe." Still nothing. I was halfway to leaving the bag on the porch when I heard it. A faint, sharp creak from inside like a floorboard under slow, deliberate weight. I froze. It wasn't the wind. "Hey," I called, my voice louder than I meant. "Just dropping off your order." No response. Then it came again, this time not just one creak but several. Slow, uneven steps moving across what I imagined were warped, dusty boards. Every instinct told me to turn around and go. But some part of me, against all reason, thought maybe it was just an old man taking his time, maybe hard of hearing. So I stepped off to the side, leaning toward a window. The glass was filthy, streaked in a way that made the light from my headlights smear and scatter. I could barely make out shapes inside, until I saw it. A flicker of movement, there and gone so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it. My whole spine prickled cold. I backed toward the steps, voice tight. "All right," I said, forcing steadiness I didn't feel. "I'm leaving it here." I dropped the bag right there on the porch. Didn't wait for a tip, didn't wait for anything. My hands were trembling as I turned and walked quickly back to the car, the boards groaning under each step. The second I slid inside, I slammed the locks down. My breath came in short, uneven bursts, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I was about to throw the car in reverse when the porch light flickered, not fully, just a quick dying zap, like a bulb trying and failing to wake up. Then darkness again. But in that fraction of a second, I saw something that still knots my stomach when I think about it. A silhouette inside the house, standing in the hallway, motionless, watching. I couldn't see a face, just the long, tall outline of someone. They didn't move, didn't tilt their head, didn't step forward. We stared at each other, separated by my windshield and that dusty glass, for what felt like an eternity, but must have been only a couple seconds. Then the light went dead, and the shape was gone. I didn't think. I jammed the car into reverse so hard I nearly clipped a tree backing out. My tires spat gravel as I tore down that narrow driveway, the branches whipping against the side of my car like fingers trying to catch hold. The whole drive back was a blur. My hands clamped so tightly on the wheel they ached, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, convinced something might be following. When the first streetlights of the city came back into view, it felt like surfacing from underwater. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the harsh white glow of the fluorescents, and just sat there, breathing like I'd run a mile. My phone was still in the mount, the delivery app open. I went to mark the order as incomplete, only it was already marked delivered, with a 5-star rating. The customer's name was gone, replaced by a blank space. No record. No history. It was like the order had never existed. That's when the real sickness set in. Not fear, not adrenaline, but the creeping realization that whatever I'd walked into didn't want to be remembered. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the hallway standing perfectly still, as if it knew I'd be back. I didn't tell my roommate. I didn't tell my mom when she called the next morning. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the place was abandoned and some squatter had been trying to scare me off. But deep down, that explanation felt paper-thin. The next day, against my usual instincts, I called the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office. I didn't give them my full name, just said I was a delivery driver and had a strange experience at a farmhouse near Halcombe Road. The dispatcher paused, then asked me to confirm the exact address. When I did, her tone shifted, calm, but with a weight behind it. She told me I needed to come in and speak to someone in person. That made my skin crawl even more. I went the following day, meeting with a detective in a small, windowless interview room. He didn't say much at first, just had me walk him through exactly what I'd seen, right down to the time. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said the place had been under investigation for months. It had been seized just days before after a raid tied it to a string of kidnappings in the area. The farmhouse was supposed to be empty. No one was authorized to be there, but someone had come back. They'd found food wrappers, fresh footprints, and a broken back window. I'd probably shown up right as whoever it was had returned. Whether it was one of the original suspects or someone else involved, no one could say. Then the detective's tone shifted again. "It's like someone lured you there," and he said. When he asked to see the delivery record, I told him it had vanished. He had one of their tech guys check my app history, but there was nothing. No pings, no route log, no GPS trace. Like the night never happened. He said he believed me, but his eyes said he didn't know what to make of it. Before I left, he told me flat out that I was lucky, that I'd probably arrived before something worse could happen. I walked out of that station with the cold, hollow feeling that I'd brushed against something I was never meant to see. It's been years, but I still think about that night. I quit delivery driving soon after. Can't bring myself to drive down dark country roads anymore. If I see a flicker of light in a window out there, I feel that same knot in my stomach. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd knocked one more time, or if I'd waited on that porch just a little longer. I never got answers. I'm not sure I want them, but I know this much. Something was in that house, and it was expecting me. I don't usually share things like this, but it's been sitting heavy on my chest for almost a year. I'm 28, live in Dallas, and last summer I decided to drive alone to visit my cousin in Little Rock. I left work late and figured I'd just power through the night. It's only about a 5-hour drive. Around 1:30 a.m., somewhere deep in rural Arkansas, my eyelids started getting dangerously heavy. The kind of tired where you feel your head dip and snap back up. I knew I couldn't risk dozing off behind the wheel, so I pulled into a small rest stop off I-30. It was one of those forgotten places. Single bathroom building, a couple of flickering streetlights. No vending machines, no attendants. Just silence and trees pressing in on all sides. The kind of spot you wouldn't think twice about during the day, but at night, it felt different. There was only one other car in the lot. An old beige sedan with rusted rims, parked 2 spaces away. I figured someone was sleeping in it. I backed into a spot near the bathroom, killed the engine, and let the quiet settle in. The air outside was heavy and wet, thick with humidity. Cicadas screamed so loud it felt like they were competing for some invisible prize. I sat scrolling through my phone, debating whether to close my eyes for a few minutes or get out to stretch my legs. That's when I saw movement in my side mirror. A woman was standing just a few feet from my window. Older, maybe late 70s, thin frame, wispy gray hair pulled back in a loose braid. She wore a pale blue cardigan that looked far too warm for the sticky heat. She didn't seem like she was trying to scare me. If anything, she looked scared herself. I cracked the window just enough to hear her without giving her a full opening. Her voice was low, unsteady, like she was terrified someone else might overhear. "Honey, you need to go," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder toward the tree line. "Don't stay here. Just get back on the road, please." I asked if she was okay. She shook her head quickly, her braid swaying. "Please, go now." It wasn't aggressive and it wasn't panicked. It was desperate. Like she already knew how this night ended and was begging me to change it. I thanked her, told her I'd be fine. She just stood there for a moment, her pale eyes fixed on mine before turning and walking slowly toward the trees. No car, no phone, just swallowed by the dark. I stayed frozen in my seat for a solid minute, engine off, replaying it in my head. A part of me wanted to trust her. Every nerve in my body was whispering that something was wrong. But my rational side cut in. Maybe she was paranoid, confused, homeless, just afraid of being out here alone at night. Still, I decided I'd use the bathroom quick and get back on the road. I grabbed my keys and reached for the door handle. That's when headlights exploded across my windshield. A big black truck had pulled in, no plates I could see, 2 men inside. Neither looked at me right away. I froze. Something about the way they rolled in. It wasn't right. They didn't take a parking space. The truck stopped sideways, its nose aimed directly at my front bumper, blocking me in. The passenger was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a stained white tank top. He leaned forward, forearms resting on the dash like he was studying me. The driver was older, stockier, with a trucker hat pulled low. I could just make out the red glow of a cigarette between his fingers. No one moved. For several long seconds, it was like we were in some silent standoff. My hand stayed on the key, but I hadn't started the car yet. My heart thudded so hard it rattled the steering wheel under my palms. Then the passenger opened his door. He stepped out slow, casual, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look directly at me. Instead, he strolled around the truck bed, pretending to check something. I remember the sound first. His fingers dragging slowly along the side of the truck bed, tapping every few steps. Not random, deliberate, sharp. Each tap felt like punctuation, like he was sending a message I wasn't meant to understand. Then the driver got out, stretching in this lazy, exaggerated way, like he'd just woken up from a nap. They exchanged a quick glance, the kind you only see between people who've done something together before. Rehearsed. Efficient. That was the moment I knew this wasn't chance. I snapped out of whatever stunned fog I'd been in and turned the key. The engine sputtered. Once. Twice. My stomach sank. I'd had zero issues the entire trip, and now it was hesitating, like it was deciding whether to help me or not. That single second stretched into an eternity before it finally roared to life. I threw it into reverse, but the truck was still there, blocking the only exit lane. The passenger started toward my window, hands buried in his pockets, saying nothing. His pace was slow, casual, too casual for the situation. I didn't wait to see what came next. I cranked the wheel hard, reversing into the space behind me so fast I nearly clipped a trash bin. Slamming it into drive, I aimed straight for the grass at the edge of the lot. The tires bit into the curb, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I'd fishtail. But the car caught traction, bounding over the grassy divider, and I shot back onto the entrance ramp without looking back. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. My chest was tight, every breath shallow. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, just to stop myself from panicking. I drove like that for miles, blowing past exits, signs blurring past unread. I was afraid to stop, afraid to even blink for too long. The worst part? I had no idea where the old woman had gone. She wasn't in the trees. Her car wasn't in the lot. It was as if she'd never been there at all. 40 minutes later, I pulled into a brightly lit Love's truck stop just outside Hope, Arkansas. I parked directly under the glare of the front lights, locked the doors, and sat there shaking. I kept replaying it in my head. Her warning, the men, the way they moved like a team who'd done this before. Eventually, I went inside, grabbed a bottle of water, and tried to steady my voice as I asked the cashier, "You know if there's any rest stops between here and Prescott?" He didn't even have to think about it. "Only one I can think of, but it's been shut down over 2 years now. People kept getting robbed out there. Some even went missing. Whole place is boarded up now." He said it like it was small-town gossip. I stood there staring at him, the hum of the coolers in the background suddenly deafening. I wanted to ask him 100 questions but couldn't even figure out where to start. Back in my car, I pulled up the map on my phone. That rest stop wasn't marked, not on any updated GPS listing, but I had been there. I'd seen the building, the lights, the woman, the men. They were real. And then a thought hit me so hard my skin prickled. What if she had been one of the missing? Someone who'd fallen into that same trap and was trying to stop it from happening again? I don't believe in ghosts, but I also don't believe in coincidences like that. When I told my cousin the next morning, she went pale. Her husband, Matt, used to work in law enforcement. He said that stretch of Arkansas had a string of disappearances in the early 2010s. Mostly travelers, mostly women. They never caught anyone. Some people believed the victims had simply run away, but Matt said a few of the stories sounded too familiar. One detail kept surfacing. Several of the missing were last seen at or near that same rest area. I reported what happened, but without plates or clear descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. Still, Matt passed my story along to an old friend at the state police. Now, I don't stop at rest areas, not even during the day. I keep my tank above half and map out every major gas station before I leave. I wish I'd listened to her the moment she spoke. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten out of my car, or even hesitated a few seconds longer. But I know this. She saved me. Whoever or whatever she was, she saved me. And if even one person reads this and thinks twice before stopping alone in the middle of nowhere, maybe she's still saving people, even now. I've been driving a tow truck for close to 13 years now, mostly along the empty rural stretches of Arizona. Out there, the highways run straight for miles with nothing but dry brush and rust-colored dirt on either side. On some nights, you can go a full hour without passing another set of headlights. I've always preferred the late shift, less traffic, fewer angry commuters flipping you off. It's just me, the open road, and the occasional stranded motorist who thought they could push it without gas. That night I was working the usual late hours. I was 42, newly divorced, trying to keep myself too busy to think about the empty house I went home to. After a while, you get used to the nighttime rhythm. The way the desert hums in silence, how it's so still you can hear your own pulse in your ears. It was a little past 11 when dispatch radioed in. A woman had broken down off Highway 86 about 15 miles west of 3 Points. She was alone. Engine dead. Phone almost out of juice. I remember thinking that was about the worst place to be stranded. Spotty cell service, no street lights, just pitch-black desert and the occasional coyote song drifting in from somewhere unseen. I headed out right away. By the time I spotted the faint blink of hazard lights in the distance, I'd already passed 2 jackrabbits and a fox, their eyes catching my high beams before darting back into the dark. Her car, a silver Honda Civic, was parked crooked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing in slow, steady beats. She stood beside it with her arms wrapped tight around herself. Mid-20s, maybe. Messy dark hair tied into a loose bun, hoodie and leggings. Not exactly warm enough for the desert chill that creeps in after sunset. She looked cold, sure, but also on edge. I stepped down from my truck and gave her a quick wave. "You the one who called for a tow?" I asked, keeping my tone easy. She nodded but didn't smile. In the brief sweep of my flashlight, I saw her hands shaking. "I'm Rick," I told her. "We'll get you out of here in no time." "Jamie," she said. Her voice was soft, almost flat, and her eyes kept darting down the highway, quick, uneasy glances, like she was either waiting for someone or hoping they wouldn't show. As I leaned over the hood, she spoke again. "Car just died on me. No warning. Just died." I popped the hood and instantly spotted the problem. The battery cable had been loosened, just enough to cut the power. That doesn't happen by accident. I looked back at her. "Did anyone mess with your car before it stopped?" Her answer came too fast. "No." She shook her head hard, eyes sliding away from mine. That's when I noticed the bruise, faint but there, just under her jaw, half hidden by the hood of her sweatshirt. My gut nodded. I didn't push her. "All right," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Let's get you hooked up." I moved quicker now, the weight of something unspoken pressing into the space between us. I just secured the hook under her bumper when headlights flared in my mirrors. A truck. Coming fast. Way too fast for this road. Jamie went rigid. I stepped slightly in front of her without thinking. The vehicle skidded to a stop behind mine, a dark blue pickup, older model, early 2000s. The driver's door flew open before the engine had even died. A tall, wiry man stepped out, shaved head, big, restless hands that flexed as he walked like he couldn't decide whether to play it cool or lose it completely. "Jamie!" His voice was sharp, cutting through the night. "What the hell is going on?" She didn't answer, just took a small step back, almost behind me now. That told me everything. "You know this guy?" I asked, eyes still on him. A pause. Then, "He's my boyfriend." But there was no conviction in her voice, no warmth. She said it like she was reading from a script someone had shoved into her hands. He took another step forward. "She doesn't need a tow. We got it handled. I'll fix it." The look he gave me was the kind you give a bug, right before you decide whether or not to crush it. I kept my voice level, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "Car's not drivable. Already started hooking it up," I said. His jaw tightened, a little tick, but I caught it. Guys like him hate being contradicted, especially in front of their target. For a moment, the only sound was the desert wind moving across the asphalt, long enough for the hair on my arms to stand on end. Then he gave me a smile that wasn't a smile at all, just lips peeled back to show teeth. "Why don't you unhook it?" he said, voice smooth but coiled tight, "and let her decide." I turned to Jamie, and this time I made sure she met my eyes. "Do you want to go with him?" She didn't speak, didn't even blink. Her pupils were wide, glassy. She stared at him like he was holding a gun, though his hands were empty. That was all I needed. "I think she's safer with me," I said, turning my back to him and walking toward the truck to finish the hookup. That's when he moved, fast. His hand darted into his jacket. I didn't stick around to find out what he was reaching for. I turned into him hard, putting my shoulder into his chest, knocking him sideways into the Civic. Metal groaned and he stumbled, catching himself on the hood but staying upright. "Get in the truck, now!" I shouted to Jamie. She didn't hesitate. She bolted for my cab. He was already reaching into his jacket again when I climbed in after her. Door slammed, locks clicked. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. Outside, he pounded on the hood, shouting words I didn't bother to make out. I threw the truck into gear and pulled onto the highway, the Civic clattering behind us. In the mirror, I caught one last glimpse of him chasing us for a few strides before the darkness swallowed him. We didn't speak at first, just breathed, shaky, uneven. My eyes kept flicking to the rear view, expecting those headlights to reappear, but the road stayed empty. Jamie stared out the passenger window, her arms locked so tightly around her ribs it looked painful. Her hands trembled in her lap. I reached into the console and offered her a water bottle. "You okay?" She nodded, still not looking at me, then whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't casual. It was heavy, like it had been sitting in her chest for a long time, waiting for someone who'd earned it. I didn't push for more. Sometimes silence is the safest place for someone. But 10 minutes later, she started talking, halting like stepping barefoot over glass. His name was Trent. They'd dated for a few months. When she ended it, he didn't. He started showing up in places he shouldn't be, sending hundreds of texts, calling at all hours. Her parents told her to ignore him. The cops said there was nothing they could do unless he actually did something. That night, she'd been heading to her sister's place in Tucson. Her baby, thank God, had already been picked up by her mom. She hadn't told anyone she was leaving. She thought that would keep her safe. It didn't. Trent had followed her. When she went into a gas station bathroom, he must have popped the hood and loosened the battery cable. "I didn't know he was out there," she said quietly. "I just felt it." We pulled into a small police station outside Tucson around 1 in the morning. I parked, walked her inside, and told the officer exactly what had happened. They took it seriously this time, maybe because I was standing there, maybe because she looked like she'd just crawled out of a nightmare. They brought her into the back to give a statement. I waited in the lobby. When she came out, she didn't just thank me, she hugged me. Not a polite, half-hearted hug. A full, shaking, don't-let-go embrace. "You saved my life," she said. Maybe she was right. But even now, I get chills thinking how close it came to ending differently. I drove back alone, the Civic still hitched behind me. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment his hand disappeared into that jacket, wondering what would have happened if I'd hesitated, if she'd said the wrong thing. if he'd gotten there a few minutes earlier. That night, I learned something. Towing cars isn't always about busted engines and flat tires. Sometimes you roll up on someone's worst nightmare. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, you get the chance to stop it before it becomes a headline. I was 28 when it happened. At the time, I was working remotely for a publishing company and had decided to take a solo road trip from Arizona to visit a friend in Denver. I just crawled out of a bad breakup, and the idea of an open road felt like the kind of therapy I didn't know I needed. I planned my route to cut through some of Colorado's most scenic mountain highways, roads I'd seen in travel blogs, winding through pine-covered slopes and jagged rock faces. It was late October, that strange in-between season when autumn's last gold clings stubbornly to the trees. But the wind already bites like winter. I remember that day with crystal clarity, because it was the first morning I ever saw frost on the inside of my windshield. I'd left my motel around 7 a.m., coffee in hand, music low, trying to let the rhythm of the tires and the mountains unwind the knots in my head. By the time I reached the mountain pass, it was close to 2 in the afternoon. The sun had begun to dip, spilling long, honey-colored beams across the rocky slopes. The road narrowed there, curling sharply along cliffs with very few safe spots to pull over. There weren't many other cars, maybe 1 or 2 in the last half hour, which made the drive feel both peaceful and faintly unsettling. Just me, the wind, and the endless drop at the road's edge. Every so often, I passed signs warning of falling rocks and urging drivers to use the emergency pull-offs only in cases of real trouble. I didn't think much about it until I saw the SUV, dark green, hazard lights blinking, parked at an odd angle on a strip of gravel shoulder up ahead. A man stood next to it, waving both arms like he was flagging down a lifeboat. As I got closer, I could see his face. He looked desperate, genuine distress etched deep into his expression. I slowed instinctively, wrestling with that city-bred caution that says, "Don't stop for strangers," and the quiet rural reality that here, if someone was truly in trouble, help might not come for hours. He stepped closer to the edge of the road as I eased onto the shoulder, stopping a few yards behind his SUV. My pulse ticked up, not from fear exactly, but from that prickling, heightened state when something doesn't feel right, but your brain hasn't put the pieces together yet. I cracked the passenger window just a few inches. He leaned toward the gap, breath puffing against the glass. "My wife," he said, voice trembling. "She's having some kind of, I don't know, medical thing. I can't get her to talk. I don't know what to do." His words tumbled out in short bursts, his eyes darting back toward the SUV as if expecting a scream, or maybe a sudden movement. "Do you have a phone?" I asked. He shook his head. "Dead. You?" I hesitated, then lied. "No." Even now, I can't explain why I said that. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of me sensed something was off. But I did the stupid thing anyway. I opened the door and stepped out. From that angle, I could see into the SUV more clearly. My gut clenched. There was no one inside. The back seats were empty. The front passenger seat was reclined but untouched. No jacket, no purse, nothing to suggest another person had been there at all. I froze, staring, my mind trying to fit this into the story he'd just told me. He noticed, and his tone shifted, not in words but in energy. His voice got faster, chattier. "She must have, I don't know, gone out to throw up. Maybe wandered off into the trees." He gestured vaguely to the steep slope beside us, thick with pines and jagged boulders. My eyes followed his motion. That's when I saw it. Movement. Slow, deliberate. Not the startled flinch of a lost hiker. About 20, maybe 30 feet into the trees, half crouched, someone was rising. Another man, taller, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. His face was shadowed by the branches, but I could see enough. He wasn't scanning the area. He wasn't looking for anyone. He was looking at me. He began walking forward, not rushing, just steady, unhurried steps, like there was no need to chase what he already believed he had. My stomach turned cold. Every instinct in me screamed, "Move, run, now." But my legs betrayed me, locking in place for that half-second too long. The man beside me shifted a step closer. His expression changed. Gone was the frantic husband, replaced by something colder. Expectant, like he was waiting for a signal. "I think she went that way," he said again, pointing toward the man in the trees. Pointing again, but I didn't even follow his hand this time. Instead, I took a single step back toward my car, then another, keeping my eyes locked on him. "You sure you can't call someone?" he asked. His tone had shifted, sharper now, with an edge that told me he knew I was lying about not having a phone. I'll check," I mumbled, my voice so faint it barely left my throat. My legs kept moving me backward, slow but steady. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't want to lose sight of either of them. The man in the trees was closer now, his figure coming into sharper detail between the pines. His mouth hung slightly open, and there was nothing in his face, no curiosity, no confusion, just blank focus. On me. That was when instinct overrode everything. I spun and bolted for my car. I didn't glance back to see if they gave chase. I yanked the driver's side door open so hard it slammed into my hip, scrambled inside, and hit the lock before my body was even fully in the seat. My hands shook as I fumbled the keys into the ignition. The man by the SUV shouted something. I couldn't make out the words over the roar of my own heartbeat and the sudden cough of the engine catching. I floored it, tires spitting gravel as I lurched back onto the narrow road, swerving slightly before the tires gripped. For a few seconds, my rear-view mirror was empty. Then they appeared, side by side now, standing completely still, watching me go. No chase, no surprise, just watching. I didn't let myself slow down for over an hour. My hands were welded to the steering wheel, knuckles aching from how tightly I gripped it. The winding road blurred past me, every curve and shadow sending a fresh jolt of fear that I'd see their SUV ahead, like they'd found some hidden shortcut and were waiting for me. But the road stayed empty. It wasn't until I reached a small rest stop, little more than a vending machine, a trash bin, and a faded wooden board with a map, that I finally pulled over. My legs wobbled when I stepped out. My phone flickered to a single weak bar of signal, and I called my friend in Denver. I tried to sound normal, but the moment she picked up, my voice cracked, and everything spilled out. I didn't call the cops right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to even tell them. Technically, nothing had happened. No one touched me, no one blocked my car, no one flashed a weapon. But that hadn't been some random roadside mishap. I knew what I saw. More importantly, I knew what I felt. Pure, deliberate intent. The next morning, I did report it to the local sheriff's office. The deputy didn't outright dismiss me, but I could hear it in his tone. He thought I was mistaken, maybe just spooked from being alone in the mountains. He asked if I'd gotten a license plate. I hadn't. He said they'd check the area, but it was probably nothing. I left feeling both frustrated and oddly relieved, because the truth, the part I didn't say out loud, was that if those men had really wanted to catch me, I think they could have. I think they were waiting for something, maybe just a few more seconds of hesitation, a few more steps between me and my car. It's been 3 years, and I still think about it every single time I pass a vehicle with hazard lights on. I still drive. I still take solo trips. But I never stop for anyone anymore. It sounds cold, I know, but I've made my peace with the choice. I'd rather live with guilt than not live at all. I don't know who they were, what they planned, or how many others they'd tried it on. Maybe nothing ever came of it. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep down, I know the truth. If I had taken just a few more steps toward that tree line, you wouldn't be reading this right now.